Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where the orchard of wisdom shows are at your fingertips. It ignites your soul, your heart, your spirit, your mind, and your body with illumination from people who have made the journey before you. They're here now to help you on your journey, on your path of self-discovery. We are funded by you, the audience, and the people we interview. If you wish to support us, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com and press on our Fund Action button. Anything is appreciated. We'd like you to sit back and enjoy the shows. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Your Health is Your Choice, right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Dr. John Poothullil. We're going to call him Dr. John today. Now, he's been in practice for a very long time. In fact, actually, he's retired now. But he actually likes to empower his patients with new scientific insights, and he likes to expose the medical myths. You know, this genre right now is your health is your choice, and it is your choice. How you look after yourself is your choice, but do you have the right information? He empowers patients with new insights and complementary approaches to prevent obesity, reverse diabetes, and survive cancer. He's practiced medicine as a pediatrician and allergist for more than 30 years, and 27 of those in the state of Texas. He received his medical degree in Kerala, India in '68, and he has done 2 years of medical residency in Washington, D.C. and Phoenix. And he's currently living in
Portland,
Portland?
Oregon.
For Oregon, right, exactly. So there is an awful lot of misinformation out there. Here in BC right now, we are having a doctor shortage like crazy. And so we have many people have turned to Dr. Google. And Dr. Google isn't always qualified and isn't always giving out the right information. How do we get the right information? How do we take charge of our own health issues? How do we know what to do? And this is really the big question today. So let's ask Dr. John, because we all need a lot of guidance on this subject. Welcome to the show.
Sarah, I thank you for having me, and I thank our listeners. Let us start with what is going on right now, COVID.
Mm-hmm.
There are, and the whole Canada is in the news right now because some people don't like vaccination.
Yes.
Some people don't like wearing masks. And not only that, they don't like it personally, they don't want others to follow that. So the question is, why? The answer to that is there is a big gap between science, which the scientific knowledge of scientists, and the science knowledge of average person. So that gap is filled with Dr. Google, anybody who can put in information. You get information from your neighbors, from your friends, from other sources, from people who believe you trust.
Yeah.
What if they don't give you the right information?
There is plenty of that going on, plenty. I mean, the stories that I've heard from people, you know, of what they've read on the internet, so therefore it must be true. And it's just like, have you really looked at what you're saying? And, you know, can a microchip actually be put in that liquid? And, you know, we're all becoming mindless robotics of the politicians around the world. It's sometimes I think we have to take ownership of that. If it really does look ridiculous, it most probably is. But we're inclined to go into the sensationalism of something and get caught up in the whirlwind rather than really breaking it down and looking at the facts.
Well, let's just look at it another from the consumer's point of view. I have a question. Where do I go to get the answer? The easiest is the social media.
Yes.
And the problem is I don't have the scientific, the critical thinking ability to analyze what is right, what is wrong. So what do? I trust somebody, and whatever he says, I take it. It doesn't matter.
Yes, don't think for myself, right?
Right. what is the problem there is the person that you trust. Does he have the scientific knowledge to tell you what he thinks you need to do? So what we do is what is comfortable for us, what makes sense, what is easy to do, we do it as long as it serves a purpose. Now, if I may, we can discuss the COVID situation a little bit if you are
Yeah.
into that. That's a good example of what's going on. First of all, COVID comes from coronavirus, which is a virus, a normal resident of bats. It does not attack bats. Bats tolerate, just like human beings have lots of bacteria in the intestine, in the mouth, in the nose. We tolerate them. But then when the bats, from the bat, the virus can get into an intermediate animal because it mutates. The virus is an RNA virus that is designed to mutate. So the question is, what is mutation? Let's start with that. The way I explain it is like, suppose you have a recipe for a dish and one ingredient is missing.
Yeah.
You replace it, substitute something else, and nobody will even know the difference. But you have mutated that recipe.
Right. Yeah.
The coronavirus has 30,000 building blocks called nucleotides. And in every person, when it multiplies, it uses whatever nucleotide is available if it fits in that space.
Right. Right.
It is the configuration, the structure that makes the difference. And so the original Wuhan variety, it came from bats to an intermediate animal because there is 1,200 nucleotide differences between the human version and the bat version. So there was an intermediate animal from which it came to humans because the Wuhan market had thousands and thousands of animals, live and dead, and there were people coming in, and it was lunar New Year celebration. Yeah. So people from around the world came there, they caught the virus, and they spread it all around the world.
Yeah.
When it went to Italy, it mutated. And now I'm going to go a little bit more into detail of how it infects you. May I?
Yes, please, because I mean, this confuses people.
Now, when you go and blow on a mirror, if you breathe on a mirror, the mirror gets cloudy. Why? Because there's water moisture coming, droplets coming out of your breath. Each breath sends out some water droplets. If you are infected with a coronavirus, each one of those droplets can carry a virus. So when you breathe out, when you cough, you're spraying the area with the virus, and somebody in front of you breathes that virus into the nose. And it goes into the sinuses because the virus, keep in mind, it does not go through your skin into your body.
Yes. Yeah.
So the question is why? Why doesn't it go through the skin cell? Because it needs a particular receptor to attach itself. The spike protein attaches itself to the receptor. It has to go, what is called ACE2 receptor. Only not every cell in the body has that receptor. The skin cells don't have it. That's why it cannot go through the skin. So if you touch the virus, it won't go through your hand into the body.
Right.
It has to be breathed into the sinus, and the virus gets into the sinus lining cells, attaches itself. The very attachment is the signal for the cell nucleus to let the virus in. Because the cell nucleus cannot make a value judgment. Is it a virus or is it a nutrient?
Yeah.
Because some of the body nutrients have the same configuration. So it attaches itself, the virus gets in, the virus goes into the cell nucleus and takes over the nucleus, the gene in charge of construction in the cell.
Right.
And it forces the gene to issue a work order incorporating the complete gene sequence of the virus, and it is carried by the messenger RNA. The RNA is the messenger that takes the work order with the blueprint of the virus into the manufacturing facility in the cell. And it instructs the cell manufacturing facility to produce more copies. It will churn out more copies and it will come out of the sinus cell. And then when you breathe in, it goes into the lungs. When you breathe out, you spread to the other people. The lung lining has the same H2 receptor. So it can damage the lungs, especially if you have a lung problem before. So it does not damage or infect other organs, so lungs and sometimes kidneys, because they have this particular receptor. This is why people who have asthma, people who have respiratory problems, who have to be extremely careful.
Yes. But the interesting thing here in Canada, asthmatics are not considered high risk.
Oh, they are.
I know, but not here. When I tried to get my vax, it was not considered high risk. So I had to wait for my age group to come up. No, asthmatics are not considered high risk. And I said, it's a respiratory disease. I have a respiratory problem, and it didn't make sense, but that's what they'd come to the conclusion with.
Yeah, I don't know how they come to that. So this is the type of problems. So a person who knows the problem, like you, even you cannot get the right information.
Right, exactly.
So you can sympathize with the common person who does not have as much knowledge of science. So this is why, if you are not breathing in the virus, you are protecting yourself.
Yeah.
If it a simple mask will prevent you from having, how can you not do it?
I know, all my rights. Yeah, and it's like, okay, everybody has a right to live, and
please think of your children.
I know.
They cannot even get vaccination. I thought we were all naturally, all adults, they have the natural ability or thinking power to protect children.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
It is something I cannot understand.
No, can't fathom, no. And, the interesting thing is that it's just a flu. It's just an aggressive flu. That's, everybody gets flus. Flus happen all the time. It's just a flu. But this flu happens to be such a killer. So why is this flu more aggressive and a killer? So therefore, could it be something different? You can do that argument and they still will deny it. And then, of course, the actual vaccine itself is a government controlled substance that's going to make you robotic or be under the control of the government. And I pose this question to people. We have a very hard time of world leaders talking to each other. Where do you think that they came together to discuss in creating a vaccine that was going to make everybody mindless and robotic and follow their leaders? Right? Because they can't agree with anything. So how did they agree on that?
Also, how do they prevent their followers getting the same?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's that some people just don't think rationally. They rather go to the sensational. And from what I understand with the vaccine itself, a lot of people would then say, well, it's going to kill all the good cells. But from what I understand, it's more of a blocker than it is a killer.
Let us see how a vaccine works.
Right.
Now, in the case of coronavirus, it has to attach itself to the particular receptor on the wall of the cell. Otherwise, it cannot get in.
Right.
Now, when you get an infection, actual coronavirus infection, the body produces antibodies. There are different classes of antibodies. The antibody that is relevant is the one that blocks the attachment.
Right. Okay.
And that is called the IgA antibody. It is on the mucous membrane because these cells are on the mucous membrane. There are IgG antibodies, IgM antibodies in the blood, but they don't come into the picture to block it.
Right.
So if we can produce more antibodies to block, then you
Right.
are better off.
Right.
When you get an infection, the body produces antibodies to different parts of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
Only a certain portion is for blocking,
Mm-hmm.
because the body cannot distinguish. There's
Right.
nobody there says, okay, this is the portion you
This
want
is your
me to.
department. That's your department. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But what has happened is the scientists were able to identify the portion that is a spike protein that attaches itself. So they separated that segment
Mm-hmm.
and produced a vaccine with that segment. So that means what you are getting is not the whole virus.
Right.
It cannot cause an infection,
Mm-hmm.
but it can protect you better than the infection itself, because the antibodies produced by infection are for different parts of the virus, not more for the blocking part.
Right.
And when you get an infection, yes, you will get immunity, but you can also have danger,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are a diabetic
Mm-hmm.
or a asthma patient or other lung problems. You are in at more danger. So you can avoid that danger with a vaccine better than by getting infection. Some people say natural infection is better. No, it is not.
Mm-hmm.
It-
Now, my daughter's had it twice. She had it before she had her first vaccines, and then she got the Omicron as well
You're right.
after her vaccines.
Okay. Now, do you know why that happens?
No.
Okay. So let's go back, and the Wuhan version, when it to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
the spike protein mutated, it got stronger. It could latch on to the receptor and stay longer.
Right.
So that is why
Is
they
that the
got
different name variants? So,
correct.
the Delta variant and all of these variants. So,
Yeah. So each virus, when it mutates, two things can happen. One, the virus can become more virulent, more dangerous, and kill the cells faster in the
mm-hmm.
body. The second is it can produce evading mechanisms to evade the antibody. So one can go more virulent, one can go more, it can spread faster. The Delta variant had both these mutations.
Mm-hmm.
That is why it became the most dominant strain around the world.
Right.
Okay. Then once the virus reaches that level, it has to choose a path, either become more virulent or more evasive and more spreadable.
Mm.
If it becomes more virulent, what happens? It kills the host,
Yes.
and that it ends there.
Yeah.
Whereas if it becomes more evasive, it cannot be more strong. It can
Mm.
spread faster, but it becomes less virulent.
And that's the Omicron.
That is the Omicron.
Yeah.
So that is the normal pathway for every virus.
Right. It has its strength, and then you can get it faster. It becomes easier spread, but every time it does that, it weakens in its dominancy.
Yeah, it can go only one or the other direction,
Right.
because even human beings, we can reach a height
Yes.
after which no matter how much you eat, you cannot get any farther.
Right. Right. Right.
So every biological system has an upper limit.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why it is fine. That is a normal way. We have to deal with it. It is better to prevent the infection. That is
Yes.
the moral of the story.
Right.
And that way we can get over it faster. The 100 years ago, the flu pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
it lasted 4 years or
Yes.
more, because they did not have a vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the vaccine, we can cut down that time to half of that.
Right. Yes. And the other interesting thing is, where in the history of our time has all these scientists from different countries come together to work on a vaccine to help the whole humanity? right?
Exactly.
Normally, they're always so protective over their own, and instead
Yeah,
they were sharing information because I know
right.
COVID, everybody thinks it only happened in Wuhan. It's actually been around for a long time. It
Yeah,
just wasn't a pandemic.
yeah, yeah. You are absolutely right. See, again, if people slow down,
Yeah.
think about it,
Yes.
but it is our job, people like you and me, to let them at least know that there is another point of view that you should consider without emotion.
Right. And that's it. We're not out to get you.
Right,
We are out to educate you. We're not out to get you. Everybody wants to go back to work, wants to go back to a life where they feel they can get on without, start, stop, start, stop. And we're all frustrated. There's a great deal of depression that has come out of this. There's
absolutely.
also a great deal of many gifts have come out of this, where people have really had a good take stock of their lives and what's really valuable. Many people have changed and pivoted and gone in totally new directions, career-wise, lifestyle-wise. It's really encouraged people to kind of take care of their health so they don't become susceptible to illness. So there's a lot of good things out of it, but those that protest the most are always the loudest.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
So we are getting that. But when we look at how many people have been inoculated around the world and how the entire virus is losing its momentum because it's got no one to attack anymore. And even if it did, it's only going to be like a bad cold rather than deadly. The proof is in the pudding.
right.
So, for all these arguments that it's making people rheumatic or taking control over them or putting something in their bodies that's going to kill them, then how many millions of people or trillions of people have been inoculated? Are we all now robotic and under somebody's control? It's like somewhere along the line, common sense. I did a show of this right at the very beginning. Please, folks, use your common sense.
Yes,
It's very, very easy to get caught up in the whirlwind and the tornado of misinformation or of fear, of panic. Never in the history of time have we had a pandemic that's hit every country in the world at the
right.
same time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it caused a great deal of panic. But that's when you take a deep breath and I go, okay, while the powers that be, the scientists that be, are working this out, what can I do to protect myself and my own family, right?
Exactly.
And
Yes,
that common sense came at first. The doctors were not saying about masks because they didn't know how it was being
right,
shared. And then once they knew, it was the mask. So
right.
instead of looking at, okay, they're willing to say that was a mistake. We now know you need to wear masks. That's the prevention. Now we wear a mask. You would have people argue against it. But you told us we didn't need to wear a mask. Well, at that time, they didn't know how it was transmuted, right? So
Well, the what people don't understand is science is changing all the time.
ongoing, as you get more information, it reveals something else. Yes.
Exactly. The new information, based on new information, you
Mhm.
have to change what you already decided to
Yes.
be true. In
Yes.
science, what is true is at the moment based on information available.
Yes.
When the information changes, the conclusions
So does the
change.
science change? Yes.
Right. So
It's not
that
a fixed in point.
most common person don't understand that.
No.
So that is why somebody in an authority, a political figure, can take advantage of that. A
Yes.
religious person, it's a dogma. It
Yeah.
is a religion. Once it is in the religion, you cannot change it.
Right.
So if the religious person treats the virus the same way, then you cannot tell him something different than the first one.
Right. Yeah.
He's not used to thinking like that.
Yeah.
I go back and say that our brain functions at three different levels. One is the cognition. You get information
Yeah.
through all your senses. The second is the analysis. What does that information mean?
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you are a mother, the moment your child starts crying, you know who is crying, regardless of all the other
Yes.
noises.
And what that cry means.
Right.
Yeah.
You know that you have analyzed it because you have heard it so many times, you
Yeah.
know immediately.
Yeah.
Then you have the emotional aspect. Do you want to be happy about the
Mm-hmm.
sound or sad about it or concerned about it? You act on it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go through the three steps: cognition, analysis, and action or emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have to do the analysis, it makes
We're
it
already
easy.
reactionary.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So they allow somebody else to do the thinking and analysis. Just tell me what I should be.
Yeah. But
I
there's
should
been such an attack against scientists around the world. And you had a political party in your country
yes.
that was so anti-science that it didn't matter. I mean, in fact, never read anyway, but and apparently went down the toilet, literally flushed down the drain. That you could just see, the hands in the head of the science from around the world, all the scientists. They're not out to get you. They're not out to deceive you. There is no agenda here other than saving lives. No, 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 it's a hoax. No, no, it's a lie. When you've got a political leader who is talking to people who choose not to embrace knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Real knowledge, scientific knowledge, fact knowledge, proven knowledge, but rather buy into the sensationalism, then what do we do? Because how can you get through to people like that? You can't.
Yeah. That's exactly the difficulty of disinformation. Somebody using it deliberately to achieve a particular objective. That
Yes,
is the definition of disinformation.
yes. And I think at a high level like that should be accountable because it becomes criminal.
Well, that depends. There's a lot of problems. Then you get into the legal
I
side.
know, I know. And the legal side of it has so many ins and ways out around it because we know there's certain people that are untouchable. But I think it's, what this show is called Your Health is Your Choice, is because if you don't know, inquire. Where do you inquire? For
Right.
me, I used to go to doctors to find out what my diagnosis was. And then I would research as much holistically as I could to
Right.
what could I do about it? Because for me, it was always prefer to go to the holistic, not demeaning the doctors at all. But I know at 1 year I was on antibiotics 8 times in 1 year.
Hmm.
And that just broke my system down. And when I built it back up and didn't go on any antibiotics, I started being well and not needing to go on antibiotics. So there has to be a marriage between Western medicine and other medicines. And if they can merge together, they really can treat the whole, can't they? And
Yes.
that is the encouragement. I know a lot of people who have not been vaccinated, but they're holistic people. And they've tried it, they've decided to go down the holistic measures of building their immune system and other protections. That is their choice. At least they're investigating something and not just blindly sitting back and denying it. It's one of the big problems I think that we're seeing right now is there's an extremely high level of anxiety,
Yes.
of depression, and we know that that brings about dis-ease, which brings about disease. And this is, people are battle weary at the present moment. There's an economic crisis going on where a lot of people have lost their jobs and don't know how secure their future is going to be. And that takes, wear and tear on the
Yes.
psyche and on the body. And
Yes.
so I think we're almost going into a post-traumatic stress syndrome here right now, that, okay, I've been vaxxed, we're coming out of it, but what do I do now? Because a lot of people, I think, have kind of at that lower vibration. Some just want to get on with it. They've put their foot to the pedal, but others are still in that limbo and under this anxiety cloud. What would you recommend for them, in how they can empower themselves to take their own health and well-beingness back?
The, let's look at what you're talking about is continuous stress and
Mm-hmm.
burnout.
Yes, yes.
The what is the reason for having stress? Stress is our mechanism to escape injury.
Mm-hmm.
It is primarily meant to escape physical harm. And the brain senses danger. It sends a signal to the adrenal gland to release adrenaline and cortisol. The adrenaline increases the heart rate and breathing to pump more blood into the muscles so that you can move away or fight, either
Right.
fight or flight.
Yes.
The cortisol causes release of glucose so that the muscles can have energy source
Mm-hmm.
to convert the glucose into ATP or energy. So this is the function. Now, in every organ or system, there is an upper limit because they are designed to last for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
If you put a very tasty food in your mouth, if you take a bite, initially the intensity of enjoyment increases.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes down. Even if you put more of the same food in the mouth,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot taste anymore. Why? Because it is reaching the upper limit of
Mm-hmm.
signal production from the taste buds. It doesn't matter what the stimuli is,
Yeah.
the taste buds have reached an upper limit. Another example is insulin release. Insulin is released from the pancreas when your blood glucose level goes up. But there is an upper limit to the amount of insulin pancreas will release. Even if the blood sugar goes up, no more insulin comes up.
Mm.
Why? Because that organ has to last a lifetime. You don't
Right.
want to exhaust it.
So we don't want high peaks and lows. We want a kind
Right,
of a good momentum.
correct. So that is how it works. So the same with adrenaline and cortisol. There is an upper limit and then it stops. But if your stress is there,
Mm.
then you get exhausted.
Yes.
Then you need to reset. So the best way to reset is first to understand what is the problem. Most of the stress comes from not from what is happening, but from what you think could happen, what I call
Fear.
the anticipatory stress.
Yes. Yeah.
And humans are endowed with our imagination.
Yes.
When you have a problem,
What if? Oh, this is going to happen. Oh no, what if that happens? Nothing like that is happening right now. It's like, calm
and,
down.
and that once you give into that,
Yes.
every Google source will
Mm-hmm.
add to the problem.
Right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
the first thing you want to do is to cut down these extra sources
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
much as possible. But the problem is when you are not working, when you cannot go out, you don't have more, you have more
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
So I suggest people do some gardening, go out and walk, listen to some new music, watch a new movie,
Yeah.
or talk to people you have not talked to in a long time.
Read a
Because
book.
you need to keep your brain occupied.
Yes.
When you are
Otherwise,
free,
it's going to what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, right? Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That creates more problem. Then you have a question, you need to go and Google it and find out what's
Yeah.
going on. That adds more questions, more stress. So you need to find time for yourself. You need to calm down your
Yeah.
neurons. They
Take a
need
breath.
downtime.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Redivert the senses and just calm down. Meditation is great. Go for a walk in nature, wonderful. Swim, a run, what it is spend the energy. So the energy doesn't spend you.
Exactly. When you do a physical activity, you are reducing the adrenaline level, using that up. So it does not add to the anxiety part. But so if you are exercising, just plain walking will be just as good as any.
Yes, exactly. I've done a couple of shows lately on, one was on emergency prevention with children, with people who just simply don't know, like the CPR or what to do in choking or what to do with this. And instead of Googling it when it's happening, you've got young kids, you've got babies, everything is going to go into their mouth. Do your research beforehand and have that site or that platform of information that you trust at your fingertips, because everything is on the phone, at your fingertips when it's happening, because you've already done your research beforehand,
Exactly.
right?
That is the bit of science information we need to start teaching in schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the school had a playtime where everybody wears mask.
Mm-hmm.
or everybody keeps social distancing just as a plaything.
Mm-hmm.
Then as they get older, if at the workplace, if somebody comes and says the reason why you need to do that, how does hand washing help? And how does mask wearing help? Then when you are an adult, whether you're a truck driver or not, you have no problem understanding why you have to take some precaution.
But it's also, again, back to that common sense, is that we would see flu season, being its own little pandemic on its
Right.
own before COVID,
Yeah.
because people didn't touch, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, hello, germs have just gone into your hand that now you're putting on the doorknob or on this and on that. And you're wondering why everybody else is, it's just going through like lightning through the company. Right. And it's like we now have cleaning surfaces, which I hope continues afterwards because it makes sense. You don't know what people are carrying around with them, what germs they're carrying around with them. Surfaces that are touched a great deal should be cleaned very, very often.
You know what I hope and what I'm almost sure will happen next is during each flu season, now you will see more and more people wearing masks.
Yes.
And so that we can reduce the
Yeah.
intensity of flu season, that will be the good thing that's going to happen from this pandemic.
Right. Let's learn. Let's learn, folks. The what is Einstein? The thing of madness is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's like we don't want to go into any other pandemics. We don't want to go into anything like this before. Once in a lifetime or once in a few hundred years is fine, folks. Been there, done that. Let's move on. So what do? We put oil in our car. We get our car serviced to prevent any
Exactly.
issues happening with our car.
Yes.
Why are we being so lax with preventing illness with
Right.
ourselves?
Yeah, that is where you have to take charge of your
Yes.
own body.
Yes.
Yes, your doctor can help you, but you still need to think,
Yes.
what is the doctor trying to tell you? And if it does not work, what is the expected outcome?
Yeah.
If it does not happen, what do I do? Even if it happens, how can I prevent it from happening again?
Mm-hmm.
These are simple questions to help take care of your own health.
Yes. And prevention is better than cure, folks.
Yes.
When I used to give my kids echinacea, a big boost of echinacea and vitamin C in late August and early September, because if they could go through September, October, November without a cold, they may have one sniffle in January and that's it. They've gone through the year without a cold.
Yes.
But if they got sick in September, I knew they were going to have colds at least another 2 times. Right.
Yes.
So the echinacea and the vitamin C just kind of built that immune system up so that they weren't going to get the first wave of attack.
Yes.
So this is, I think, we're inclined to just abuse our bodies, abuse our own psyche and heart, soul, spirit, and then go to a doctor and say, fix me.
Yeah,
and then the doctor turns around and goes, well, you've got diabetes or you've got heart problems, you've got this. Well, how did I get that? Well, were you taking care of yourself? Type 1 diabetes is hereditary. Type 2 is lifestyle, right? So, and it can be controlled by lifestyle. So why did you get there? You weren't paying enough attention on yourself, your stress level, what you intake with your food, your physical lifestyle. And this vehicle is more expensive than your car.
Yeah.
So pay attention to it. Diabetes, let's talk about that. You do have a book on diabetes.
Yes.
I think we're seeing exponentially type 2 diabetes kind of almost being a pandemic of its own. And it's so preventable, isn't it?
Well, let's start with the classification or the diagnosis of diabetes. Diabetes is one disease. It's a very peculiar disease in the sense it is diagnosed based on one test, one finding, elevation of blood glucose level. That's it. No other disease is diagnosed like that. Just one symptom. That's all it is. Now it is divided into type 1 and type 2.
Mm-hmm.
You alluded to that. So what's the difference? In order to understand the difference, you need to know the hormone called insulin. How does it work? You know, somebody is at your door when the doorbell rings.
Mm-hmm.
You have the option opening the door or not opening it. That's up to you.
Yeah.
Every cell in the body can use glucose to produce energy. However, when glucose is outside, there is no outside the cell, there is no bell for glucose to ring to tell the cell I'm outside.
Right.
That is the job of insulin.
Mm.
So that is why insulin goes with glucose, ring the doorbell to tell the nucleus of the cell glucose is outside.
Yeah.
In type 1 diabetes, their pancreatic cells don't produce insulin.
Mm. So there's no
So
messaging going on, no communication.
no communication. The
Mm.
glucose is building outside the cell. It is just outside the cell.
Right.
But the cell nucleus doesn't know.
Right.
Because if it knows, it has to send a wagon, what's called a transporter,
Mm-hmm.
open the door, load it in, bring it in. These children used to die by age 10 until the scientists in Canada, Dr. Banding and Burst, discovered 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago, insulin, purified it, and Dr. Jocelyn in Boston is the one that treated the maximum number of type 1 diabetics with insulin.
Mm-hmm.
And the result was so amazing. And he said he trained nurses to go outside into the community, give these children insulin so that they can be saved. And he saved thousands of
Mm-hmm.
children.
Changed the whole diabetic industry altogether, didn't it? My
Then,
nephew is been a diabetic since he was a child. So,
then,
he's now
some,
got the insulin pump.
then something else happened. His own relative, an aunt, showed up with high blood glucose level.
Uh-huh.
So he injected her with insulin and the blood sugar went down.
Mm-hmm.
So he thought it's the same disease happening at an older age,
Mm-hmm.
and he called it adult onset diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something funny happened the next time. That is, when they found a test, when they formulated a test to measure the level of insulin in the blood, to their surprise, the endocrinologist found that adults with high blood sugar had normal or sometimes even higher than normal levels of insulin in their blood.
Yeah.
As against type 1 diabetics who did not have
Right.
insulin. In type 2, there is high blood glucose and high insulin at the same time.
Just not a door opening.
Well, the question is, why is that? They said there is no door opening. They came up with the concept of what is called insulin resistance. The cell is not responding.
Ah.
You know how they came about with that concept?
Mm-mm.
Or let me go back. Ordinarily, if in any science you have a concept called hypothesis, it is only a possibility. But before it is accepted as fact, it has to go through 3 validation processes. One is, does it make sense? Is it logical? Second, if it is logical, what is the mechanism by which they behave like this? Third is, how do we measure it?
Mm-hmm.
So this logic, mechanism, and measurement, this is a standard criteria in any science before a hypothesis is accepted as fact.
Gathering the intel.
Correct. But in type 2 diabetes, all those steps were sidetracked. They did not follow that. You know why? Because the endocrinologists did not want to lose patients. They were getting more and more type 2 diabetic patients.
Right.
But at the same time, they needed to justify the increased insulin and increased glucose at the same time. And it so happened around that time, the doctors, infectious diseases specialists, came out with the first account of penicillin-resistant staphylococcus bacteria.
Mm.
So there is bacterial resistance. So one endocrinologist in Vienna, Dr. Falta, thought, why can't the same thing be happening in the body with insulin?
Yeah.
He just suggested it as a hypothesis. But the endocrinologists were so happy to have an explanation. They said, that is it. That is how the insulin resistance theory was born.
And from
Then,
there?
yeah. And then there are people, pharmaceutical companies manufacturing insulin. They have a vested interest.
Oh, gosh. Get the farmer involved.
Then there are people who make gadgets to measure glucose level.
Yeah.
They have a vested interest.
Yeah.
The insulin pump people have a vested interest. Artificial sweetener people. So there are groups of people who want to keep it going.
Yes.
And don't even ask the question, do you have proof there is insulin resistance?
And so a lot of people have even cured their type 2 diabetes with diet, exercise and diet.
Yes.
So now how is that working? Well, is that stabilizing? Is it reducing? I don't know how is that working?
Let us start with insulin. If you inject somebody with insulin, the blood glucose level goes down. Where does that glucose go? It does not go out of your body.
Right.
It goes out of the blood.
Yeah.
So everybody is happy. The doctor is happy. I have done my job. If you keep your A1C below 7, I have done my job. Where does that glucose go? That's your problem.
Does it go into the fatty tissue? People put on weight?
Exactly. The insulin instructs the liver to convert that glucose into fat.
Right.
And it is the fat that is going to kill you.
Yeah.
Blocks the arteries, heart attack. But that part is not mentioned.
No. Gosh, no. I mean, it makes sense. Yes, you said. I mean, when we tell people to cut down their sugar intake because we don't want them to get fat. So it would make sense that if that glucose is there and it's not being used, where is it going to go? Fatty tissue cells.
So if you have high blood glucose level, now let me back up a little bit. If you have high cholesterol, the doctor will ask you not to put in your mouth food that contain cholesterol.
Right.
Right? When you have high blood glucose level, so let me back up a little bit. 75% of the cholesterol in the body is produced in your liver, 25% comes from your food. Yet, the doctor tells you not to eat cholesterol-containing foods. In glucose, it is the reverse. 75% of the glucose comes from your food, only 25% is produced in the body. Yet, the doctor will tell you, take this medicine, we can drive the glucose out of the blood, rather than the simple things, don't put it in your mouth.
Right. Duh. Right.
So what I'm suggesting is, what is the food group that is absorbed into the body as glucose? It is not the table sugar.
Right.
Most people stop table sugar immediately after diagnosis and say, well, it didn't change my blood sugar. No, it will not. The food group that produces the most glucose into your, after a meal is the complex carbohydrate. And in the modern diet, it comes from grains. Rice, wheat, corn.
Yes.
They are complex carbohydrates. And upon digestion, 100 years ago, less than 35% of daily food energy came from complex carbohydrates.
Yes.
Now, in developed countries, it is 50%. In developing countries, it is 70%. Why? Every government subsidizes grain farming. When is the last time you had a meal or a snack without a grain flour product?
Right. Well, actually, I'm a vegetarian. I eat a great deal of vegetables, and I had sourdough bread.
Yeah. So each time, see, I tell people, grains were never meant for humans. Otherwise, we would have had beaks to pick them up.
Right, exactly. They're for the cattle, right? For the horses, and because they can digest it better.
Yes, the birds especially, that is what grain, they can digest the chaff. Humans cannot.
Right. So it sits there and it kind of ferments. And do you think that's where a lot of the gastroenteritis and IBS and leaky gut and all of that comes from?
Well, that is some of the proteins in the grains that humans cannot digest completely. You're now talking about gliadin and gluten and things like that we are not supposed to be eating. And your immune system thinks it is a foreign agent, and it causes inflammation in the gut, and the integrity of the gut lining is destroyed. That's why leaky guts, things get into the body that should not have any reason to get in. By the way, there is a hypothesis that the type 1 diabetes happens because of this inflammation allows the proteins to get into the body. Some of those proteins have similar configuration as proteins on the beta cells of pancreas. So the immune cells get activated and they attack the pancreatic cells because of this. So the research shows that the best way to prevent type 1 diabetes is to keep breastfeeding the child. The longer you breastfeed, the better protection. Why? Breast milk contains oligosaccharides, a type of carbohydrate that promotes growth of healthy bacteria. Now, if I may go into the immune system a little bit.
Yes.
Can I explain that a little bit more?
You're very good at explaining all of this. So yes, please do.
No, what is the function of our immune system? Our immune system is to protect us from an agent that body, especially an infectious agent.
Right.
Okay. How does the immune system recognize
what's foreign?
This is foreign. This is common, or this is native. How does it know that? A new immune cell has been minted out. He comes out of the school, but he has to be trained.
Yes.
Where does he go for training? You know where he goes? Into the gut. There are 100 and 200 types of bacteria in our gut. And why are we tolerating that bacteria? Why are we not having diarrhea? And because these bacteria has, every cell in the body has a badge, to identification badge, to let the immune cells know who it is. And all those badges are represented in the bacteria in the gut. So the immune cells can go there and learn, okay, if you see this badge, that's normal. If you see this badge, that's normal. Leave them alone. Suppose the bacterial colony in the gut is different. The immune cells don't get the training needed to avoid the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. When they come back, they detect the pancreatic islet cells and say, okay, this is foreign. Because the bacteria representing that badge was not in the intestine. And why?
But what if somebody hasn't, can't breastfeed, or, it's a little late in life to do that? Is there something else we can do in place of that?
The idea, the first thing is to promote breastfeeding.
Right.
Because that promotes the normal.
But if that time is gone.
If that time is gone, the idea is to avoid as many of the wheat products that contains gliadin and gluten, so that we don't activate the immune cells.
Yeah. I had a wonderful woman on for 5 years on my network called Suma Nathan. They used to call her snake oil woman because she's, back in the 60s, but she was just a wonderful encyclopedia of information, and she retired at 81. She would always say that the liver, the colon, and the kidneys were the most important organs in the body, because if they were, not functioning right, they couldn't support the rest of the organs.
Well, you can say that with your brain, with your heart, with your almost every human body is a republic of organs and
Mm-hmm.
systems, and everybody has to function at the appropriate time for optimum health.
Harmoniously, right? It's about the harmony.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That is so. Let's a good example is type 2 diabetic people. When
Mm-hmm.
they get coronavirus infection, they suffer more, right? They have a severe disease. Why? It is not because they are more susceptible to get the infection, because they have the same number of ACE2
Right.
receptors as anybody else. They don't catch any more virus.
Right. It's just their virus attacks them more.
Once they get the virus in there, remember the nucleus sends out a work order to promote copies, to make copies of the virus in the manufacturing plant. The manufacturing plant needs materials to construct the virus and energy. Now, the materials they use is the same as normal materials every normal cell uses, but the energy comes from glucose breakdown.
Mm.
And if we have diabetes, you have more glucose. If you have high levels of glucose, insulin is high. Insulin promotes the workers to work harder. It wakes up all the workers. You have time, work to do. Go, produce more viruses. Produce. And they produce more viruses.
Mm.
And they make the infection, especially lung infection, worse. That is why they end up in the
I see you.
ICU
Mm.
more earlier than others without diabetes. Now, people with heart attack, when you have an infection, you need to send the immune cells, you need to send the repair material
Mm-hmm.
faster. But if your artery is blocked,
Yes.
they cannot reach there on time.
Right.
So your infection gets worse.
Yeah.
So this is why the people with underlying health conditions, they suffer more, not because they are more susceptible to the virus, but because the consequences of what
Yeah.
happens in the body.
Still don't know why asthma is not considered one of those, but it's the I don't know who designed it, but I mean highly complex.
It
But
is.
if you actually kind of look at it as a whole system,
Exactly.
it's kind of quite intriguing. And
Mhm.
I'm always saying that for the trillions of cells that we have in our body, all it takes is for a few of them to break down, and it can start breaking down all of the cells in our body. So it's up to us to keep each cell plump and juicy and productive, because every single cell, I also put that as every single cell has been us in the world, in the universe, right? We are that cell. We need to be plump and juicy for the collective, for the whole. Um, so prevention is always better than cure. And if you have a history of something, like in my family there's a history of cancer and there's a history of heart disease, then you've got that forewarning. So therefore you need to do those preventative measures through your life so that you're not going to be susceptible to something. But it's also being very in tune with your own body and making sure that you do have a doctor that you have a synergy with, where you feel they're hearing you, not pushing pharma. Because I know that when I used to have infections, my sugar levels would go up and immediately they would say, oh, you're diabetic, we need you on insulin. And I'll go, no, I'm not going there.
Good for you.
Take the blood test after I'm off the antibiotics. Oh, yeah, your blood sugars have gone down again. Okay, so they peak through an infection,
Yes.
right? I don't
Because
know
of,
why, but they do.
because of the stress hormone cortisol. When there's
Okay,
infection, body knows you need more energy for the immune system to work.
okay, so that's why it peaks, because it's not in balance. The defenders have gone elsewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
The body, the stress releases cortisol. Cortisol in turn releases glucose from the liver so
Mm,
that the cells can get rid of the infection.
right. Now,
Now,
I think one of the dangers was when you become a diabetic and you become so dependent on the external insulin, is that your body stops producing it for itself, especially in the type 2, right? That it's you become so dependent on it that you find it very hard to kind of turn it around. Is that
Well,
right?
there's a bigger problem than that. What is called the glucocentric approach of treating type 2 diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, when you use insulin, their lifestyle improves 100%, their lifespan goes to normal. It is so much relief. But how do we know that they are getting better? Because the lab test blood glucose level tells if that is
Right.
within the normal range, everything is fine. How much insulin to use? Use
Yeah.
enough to keep the blood glucose level within normal range.
Right.
So what has happened is the endocrinologist used same dogma on type 2 diabetics.
Mm,
You keep your blood sugar down and you are going to be fine. That is not the same disease. We are talking.
right. Yeah.
So
So why don't they call it something different then? Stop
because
confusing
then they
people.
lose, then that is what they should have done when
Yeah.
they found normal levels of insulin and glucose at the
Right.
same time. But that they will lose the patients. It becomes more a
Yes.
dietitian's or a nutritionist
Yes.
problem
Yeah.
than an endocrine problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why. Now, what they have done is everybody is brainwashed to say if you keep your blood glucose level down, you're fine. What you're treating is only a symptom.
Yes.
When you have an infection, if you keep your fever down, that doesn't mean you are controlling the infection.
Mm-hmm.
But you are led to believe.
Yes.
Every advertisement on TV about a
Mm-hmm.
type 2 diabetic medication is about you can get into your glucose zone, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Are you controlling your illness or a symptom?
Yeah.
So it's easy to take a medication and get the blood glucose down than not to put it in your mouth.
Yes.
All you have to do is to cut down your grain-based food intake to 1/2. I'm not suggesting you don't eat it, but take only half of what you're doing and you can control your blood sugar without insulin.
Now, there have been other people that have even talked about certain vegetables have too much sugar in them and you can't eat them. And I'm a 6 veggie person a night. You know, I love my veggies. Do the vegetables, are they carrying so much sugar? Are they bad for us as well?
Let me answer it this way. The Native Americans in the year 1900 were brought to the reservations and they had a complete physical exam. And two things they did not have compared to white Americans at that time were type 2 diabetes and cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? They ate all the vegetables, all the animals, all the eggs, fish, everything in nature, but they did not eat one thing, one group. You know what?
Grain
Cultivated grains. They
or
did
wheat.
not stay in one place to cultivate grains. They moved from food source to food source.
Right. Yes. Yeah, makes sense. Yes.
Now, the Native Americans and Pima Indians above age 35, 50% of them have type 2 diabetes.
Right. It's against their DNA genetics, right? I also read somewhere that.
Hello?
Oh, you froze there for a moment. I also read somewhere that when we went from spelt bread, you know, spelt's it's awful bread, but kind of like a heavy rye. When we went from spelt bread to wheat, that we started seeing more illnesses pop up, which nobody put the correlation to.
Well, we can correlate these things and associate these things with many, many things.
Mm-hmm.
The final answer is, what is the quantity?
Mm-hmm.
It is not any one particular food is wrong or right.
Right. It's
how
moderation.
Exactly.
Right.
How much you decide. The best example I give in my first book is you look at a toddler. How does a toddler eat? And you will observe three things. One, the toddler will not eat unless he or she is hungry.
Right.
Second, the toddler will pick and choose what he or she likes.
Mm-hmm.
Third, when they are done, they could care less what is left on the plate. They would rather go out and play.
Yeah.
In other words, they decide when to eat, what to eat, how much to eat, and they grow up normally.
But we then dictate, finish your food. You can't leave the table until you've finished your food. And we're shoving
Exactly.
food in them that they don't need because they know when I'm full.
Right. So they start listening to the parents at age 6.
Maybe.
And that is when the problem starts. You are disconnecting their natural control mechanism.
Right.
But you know
Right.
what? Adults still practice it, the natural control mechanisms, when you are drinking in response to thirst. You don't fill up your stomach.
Yeah.
When the
Right.
thirst is quenched, you stop.
Right.
Whereas when you start eating, you want to eat until your stomach feels full.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yes. Yes. Do you have any, theory on, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Should we have all three? I mean, some people it's one meal a day. Some people small meals throughout the day. Is it again something that we need to look at that we're comfortable with? That we feel optimized at this time if we do that?
Well, I get that question asked very often. And I tell them, my answer is like this. An adult human being breathes in about 6 liters of air every minute on an average. So if I tell you, you should breathe in 6 liters every minute, will that work? You have automatic mechanisms,
Yes.
natural mechanisms, just like in the case of a toddler.
Right.
To tell you when you are hungry, to tell you what to eat, to tell you how much to eat. Now, when you sit down, do you know what your body is looking for? What nutrient? Human body needs about 100 different nutrients. What is it deficit of? An amino acid, a fatty acid, glucose, mineral? You don't know. Now, let me give you an example. Suppose we go for lunch to a Chinese buffet, 100 items. How would you choose? How many will you choose?
Well, you kind of choose your favorites, don't you? Things
How
that
many?
you really like. I don't know, 5 or 6.
5 or 6, based on your previous experience with those things, and you enjoy it. And we sit down, and we eat, we enjoy. Okay? We go back to the same buffet in the evening. Will you take exactly the same 6 you enjoyed at lunchtime?
Probably not.
Why not? We enjoyed it. Why can't
I
you
know.
enjoy it now?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
There is a physiological reason for it. The nutrients contained in those that you already ate, they have not been used up in the body. But the body has used up other nutrients, which your subconscious mind knows where do they come from. So it sends a message to your conscious brain, okay, the others look more appealing now. And you choose those. In other words, your subconscious mind, your brain can tell you what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat.
Pay attention.
That is all you have to
Yes.
do. Whether you eat 5 times a day, 15 times a day, makes no difference.
Right.
No, there are people who said fasting is good. We are fasting between meals.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's something that is my son does it, and it's like not my thing, because I get the dizziness, I get the everything. No, it's can cut down or change or whatever, but it's I think it's
whether
not
you
for
fast,
everyone.
whether you fast or not, it's individually. No,
Yeah.
you sleep 10 hours, 8 hours, 5, you're fasting.
Yes.
So if you want to extend it 2 more hours, so go for it. That
Right.
helps you.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things we're not taught is to be in tune with our own bodies. Right? It's always, and that is, to do with life. I mean, there's actually a lovely show I did about chakra eating. If you're actually going for certain colors, that is that chakra that needs to be balanced. And one of the things we don't do is listen in.
Exactly.
Everybody is listening out. It's an external life and the external expectation, the external dictation.
Yes.
And let's say, you talked about pharma a lot, how doctors, they're going to make money if you've been sick. There is a certain culture. They'll pay the doctor to keep them well. When the patient gets sick, they don't stop paying the doctor.
Right.
right?
No,
I like that, because there's more vested interest in keeping you well, where we've created a society where some doctors don't want you to get well, like some psychiatrists want to keep you on the couch, right? And we know that big pharma is, as my lovely old lady used to say, God's pharmacy,
yeah,
right? God's pharmacy will keep you well, but big pharma, they have a vested interest in you being sick. They have a vested interest in your non-wellness. It's called profit, right? And it's not your profit, it's their profit, it's your expense. So I think this is where we have to step back and look at, just because everybody's saying, it's like these commercials,
well,
depression hurts,
well, let,
and you'll commit suicide if you take this drug, but take it anyway because it will kill your depression.
well, let's be honest. We do need pharmaceutical companies to
Oh, yes.
produce. So,
When, if you have an infection, yes, you need an antibody. When we need a
right,
virus, we need it. Yes.
right.
It is
So,
when we don't need it that it's immoral
yeah.
that
The
they are
question
putting
is,
it on us.
how do you balance out?
Balance. And that means you have to take control and listen to your own body
Exactly.
and what
Exactly.
your body needs. And also have the right to question when you go to your doctor. Like my doctor saying, no, you're a diabetic. I may go, no, I'm not. I'm not taking that diagnosis and shoving insulin in me
Yeah.
without further investigation because I don't feel a diabetic,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah. This is one, my book is about what questions to ask
yes, that's so important.
the doctors, because we are afraid to offend our doctors
I know why.
because we need them for other things.
Right. And we don't want them to turn against us and they won't look after us. Right. Yeah.
Right. They have to. So there has to be a balance. So the doctors need to be open, be questioned. And the other problem is, when I was in practice, one guy printed out sheets and sheets of paper to ask me questions. So I don't have the time to
No.
spend. So they look for answers on the social media.
Yeah. Or, yeah. I'll
So you
Google
cannot
it. Yeah.
blame them for that. They are trying, at least they are trying
Yes.
to
So
take care of.
we need more proper resources. So we're like, okay, doctor, I know you don't have the time, but
Right.
can you give me the resources of where I really can
Exactly.
investigate this? But there's also the other problem that when somebody goes to a doctor and they know they're not feeling well, they know that this is happening and that's happening, but they can't articulate what the problem is because that's not their job. And then they're dismissed as it being all in the mind. And then there's something very seriously wrong with them that has not been investigated.
Yeah, it is also the other side. The doctor may not know what it is, but he has a problem explaining that
Yeah,
I don't know this.
yes. We
So,
have to investigate.
right.
Yeah. And that means, we have to be sometimes prepared to go through some tests. And it was like that wonderful movie Concussion with Will Smith in the true story of the guy that actually discovered how soccer or football was literally causing brain damage.
Yeah,
And the only way they could find that out was in the autopsies,
yeah,
right? And it is that sometimes things don't make sense or they don't add up. And just because you're the doctor doesn't mean you have all the answers.
exactly.
But wouldn't that be nice if other doctors could talk with other doctors and talk about, I have this patient that has this symptom or has this problem. I've had one of those. It was that. If you communicated together and shared
Yeah,
the information,
yeah.
right,
The-
then you'll be able to attend to the patients better.
See, the doctors are trained to think independently. Doesn't
Mm,
matter what I think. But
right.
at sometime you need collaboration.
Yes. Don't we in everything in life?
And yeah, yeah. And so one thing, a point that you made that we did not get into is the topic of cancer.
I actually want to have you back. All right. I want you to
Yeah.
come back when we just dedicate the show to the various cancers because cancer's a big one. Maybe we
Let,
can
let-
do cancer and heart disease in one show.
yeah, let me just give you a teaser.
Yes, please, a teaser so people will come back to learn more.
Every cancer starts with one cancer cell, what's called the cancer stem cell. One cell. Now, It is similar to every human being starts from one cell,
Right.
right? When the ovum is fertilized, there's a zygote, one cell. Do you know where that fertilization takes place? Not in the womb.
Mm.
It is in the fallopian tube,
Yeah.
that tube that goes from ovum, the ovary to the womb. The ovum is traveling. That is when the fertilization takes place. There's a single cell called zygote. By the time the ovum, that embryo is implanted in the womb, do you know how many cells are there? 200.
Wow. Just from that little journey.
The question is, what was the signal that caused the ovum or the fertilized egg, the zygote, to divide? That signal came from inside the cell. It is not connected to the mother.
Ah.
So what is happening in cancer? The cancer cells multiply from that one stem cell.
Right.
It's a duplication of what has happened in nature. But in the production of a child, it is a very controlled setting. After so many cells are produced, it stops. Whereas in cancer, that control is taken out.
Interesting. We are having you back to discuss that because, you know, we talk about people being cancerous in the sense that they can spread, you know, their rhetoric or something generally not good. And there are so many different types of cancer that it confuses people. As I come from a family of that, and me, touch wood, I refuse to go that way. I got the asthma, the fibro, the other things, but I refuse to go that way. And it's the, how do people get cancer? How does it spread so fast? What can we do about it to prevent that spread? I really want you back to come of that, but also on heart disease, because, you know, one thing that comes across the news now and again, how women actually die more from heart disease than men, but it's considered a male disease.
Right.
Right. And this, again, prevention that can come into place and an awareness that come into place that's not been promoted, that's really not been spoken about. So will you come back and share those?
I'll be happy to, because I enjoyed talking with you the last hour, and because you know the subject so well. You can understand what I'm trying to say, because
But you
that is
articulate it very well. You talk in a way that isn't scientific. You talk in a way that makes sense. You're very good at describing so people can see it in a
Thank
more
you.
logical way. So
Thank you.
we are not medical people, but we are, you know, our own patients.
Yes.
And we need to have some patience with our patients.
You need to be, you take ownership of your own body
Yes.
and mind.
Oh, and that connective mind and body is essential, right? Absolutely. So in the meantime, though, how do people get hold of your many books? Because I've just got a couple of them here, the diabetes, but you have a massive amount of books here. You've got diabetes, Eat, You, Live. You have another diabetes one in Spanish, Surviving Cancer, Your Health is at Risk, and a few more. So how do people get hold of these books for you?
For information, they can go to my website, drjohnonhealth.com. And for those who are interested, I have animation videos about 10 to 15 minutes long about obesity, diabetes, and cancer.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
my 5 books are available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And people come to your show page, they just put in your name, and it will show that. And you're also on Facebook, just John on Health,
Right.
and the YouTube, Dr. John Poot. I've forgotten how to pronounce.
Yeah.
And that's Poothullil, right?
Correct.
So, right. And then, of course, you're on Instagram,
Yes.
Dr. John on Health. And please, folks, get your information from the right source. You know, there's a lot of people that Just like there are a great deal of hackers in the world, instead of taking their wonderful skills for good, they like causing trouble. And there are people that go and write stuff and they write it in such a way that it looks authoritarian and people believe it. And
Yes.
it's that just stop and think for yourself. Just stop and think, and then really go to the sources that really can give you the right facts. And the way you've described the virus to us today, exactly what it is, what the vaccine is doing, and why, we had a booster shot, which was just to make sure that that defense system is still there while we're still traveling through it. And I kind of assume there probably will be booster shots every year, rather like the flu shot in the future.
That is the ordinary flu. There are 7 different types of coronaviruses that comes back, that infect humans. 4 of them, the regular flu.
Yeah.
3 of them was the MERS and the SARS and this SARS-2. So that depends on which one affects your lungs and which one don't, because most of the flu viruses just affects your upper respiratory system.
Right. Yeah.
So coronavirus, yes, very likely this will come back as flu, as you mentioned.
Right. And so there probably would be flu shots down the road. What we don't want, folks, is for it to come back as a pandemic. Been there, done that, had it, right? So just the common sense of that if you are not feeling well, or you know that you're going to be around people that maybe who aren't feeling well, mask up. Don't forget to wash your hands. It's just cleansiness, folks, cleansiness, right? We don't want to pass the germs on. We don't also want to pick them up. And just take a breath when you hear something before you dive into that hurricane of mistruth and really look at, does that make sense? And please don't look at the scientists as the enemy. They're not.
Also, I'd say, don't accept my word unless it makes sense to you.
Exactly. Because basically the information that you've given today has given us enough substance of knowledge to that when we're reading something, we'll know if that makes sense or not. You've given us that foundation to springboard from, that now we know what to look for. Right? And that's the important thing. You'll know whether it's a mistruth or not. And, one of the problems right now is the social medias or the platforms like Spotify and YouTube are cutting all shows that mention the word vaccine, which is going to be extremely difficult because that's the only word that's been out there for 2.5 years. So there's going to be some pushback on that. And I hope there isn't any problem with this show. But just please listen to the people who know what they're talking about. And folks, take a breath. Please take a breath. We're all in this. We're all going to get through this. We're almost out of it. Right? Reduce those stress levels. You've got a wonderful canvas free in front of you. What has the last 2 years taught you about yourself? Pick up that brush, paint a canvas of what you want to see, put yourself in gear and go and get it. But don't forget, your defense system, a great deal, many of the times, is in the mind of what you're going to buy and what you're not going to buy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. This has been delightful. I'm booking you. Stay there. And we're going to have you back with cancer and heart disease, which is a big one.
I thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Folks, please come back. You'll see it, selfdiscoverymedia.com. Put in his name, Dr. John, and you will see this show and also the show to come up. I'll let you know when it's coming, but it's a topic we need to talk about. Until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. Please tune in to our selfdiscoverymedia.com/shows and you will see all the other genres that we have from you. Every week on Tuesday, we bring you new shows from illuminating people. If you know someone that should be interviewed, please contact us at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com. Now stay tuned for your next show.